Valt met je neus in een livestream. A very good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Could you please... I see the first questions have already been submitted. Here's what we're going to do. I'll be trying to answer your questions, which you can submit in the chat on the YouTube page that you've been sent to, and I'll be creating a slide for the question that I'm answering at that point, so that you know what it is that I'm talking about, and you can have another look at it as soon as this video is over. So the first question is, why is Paradise Lost by John Milton seen as a poem from the Romantics? Because nature is involved, other things as well. Okay, just allow me to create a new slide. Let's here's your question. No, that's not it. There we go. Well, there's a couple of nature is involved. That's for sure. But there's a couple of other reasons why Paradise Lost is considered a typical a poem that's typical for the Romantics. Nature is key, but nature is more importantly a metaphor for something else, for being pure and being close to God, close to oneself, and therefore close to nature. Furthermore, Paradise Lost is a poem about Adam and Eve being expelled, being banned from paradise. The fact it's about the point in time where Eve decided to listen to the snake and eat the apple from the forbidden tree. And this could be seen as a reference to society at the time, which was trying to decide for itself whether or not they agreed with religion, and at the same time science was answering questions that religion had answered up until that time. So it's very typical for this period because of those reasons. Yes, nature plays a part in it, but religion is crucial as well, and especially the battle that religion was fighting against science, not necessarily against science, because science does not play a part in Paradise Lost, but the struggle with religion and following the guidelines that religion set, which was do not eat the apple. I hope that answers your question. Can you tell something about John Milton in Paradise Lost? Well, yes, that would be the second question, but I would like you to be somewhat more specific, because yes, I can tell you loads of things about John Milton and Paradise Lost, but what would you like to know specifically? And Koen, could you let me know if I've answered your question properly? As for Mathieu, your question is why were Jonathan Swift and his work Rape of the Lock of such importance? Yeah, that's a rather vague question to answer, because what importance are you referring to? And thank you, Kuhn, for letting me know. I think I'll answer Mathieu's question in terms of Kuhn's question. Why is it significant to the period it was written in? Yeah. Why were Jonathan Swift and his work The Rape of the Lock of such importance? Why are they significant for the era that we've discussed? Rape of the Lock is mostly a very cynical piece that kind of mocks the society that the author found itself in. It was written by Alexander Pope, by the way. It wasn't written by Jonathan Swift. It's a story about a man who cuts a piece of hair, takes a lock from a woman that he's been in love with, and she and her family lose it completely. And the title in itself is a reference to the extraordinary response that he's getting, because the rape of the lock, there's no rape going on in this story. It's not that serious, although rape had several meanings at the time. What's happened is that somebody cut a piece of hair and took it. It wasn't even that much, but that's what happened. And this family, the girl and her family, want this man to give them back the piece of hair. It's no use to her anymore, because she's not going to stick it back to her head anymore, but they just want it back. And what this poem is focusing on is the extent to which certain families were living by unwritten rules, by ridiculous conventions that had been made up by others, and the extent to which they took those conventions seriously. So why are they important? Because this is a poem. I'll change the question by the way, because it's right. It was written by Alexander Pope, as I mentioned. Because it's very typical for how Pope saw society. He was very cynical, rather bitter, and he tried to describe the ridiculous character of many of the habits that people had, and the rules, the unwritten laws of society that people were living by. I hope that answers your question. Okay, then, so yeah, John Milton, what is it you would want to know about him? If you want to read up on a certain poet or poem, I advise you to use the Britannica Encyclopedia. I'll type the link in this presentation as well. If you're looking for anything, use Britannica.com, and there's loads of information about authors from this era and their poems and the historical background to these poems. So if you want to read up on one or two things specifically, then use Britannica.com. Yeah, and regarding John Milton, I'm not too sure what else to tell you about John Milton other than other than what I've just told you about Paradise Lost. There's one more thing you could, I should mention regarding Paradise Lost, which is that John Milton is thought to be an atheist, although there's no proof that there's no guarantee that he was indeed an atheist. That people think that he was an atheist, and the Paradise Lost is criticism on the church. But at the time, it was seen as criticism on the Catholic Church, because people were stepping away, especially Britain was following the Dutch lead in the new development surrounding Protestantism, and Paradise Lost was considered criticism on the Catholic Church. That's the only thing that I'd like to add to that. Other than that, regarding John Milton, yeah, there's not that much more to know about him. I'm going to discuss Lisa's question, which is, can you explain what I am a pentameter is? I can. And to do so, I'll use an example of Shakespeare's sonnet, the one which I simply just listed out. Find the text, you can copy and paste it into our presentation. Right, this is a sonnet 30 by Shakespeare, and I think we discussed it in class. I think I told you that this is a poem that at first glance seems to be about losing a friend, losing loved ones, mourning for a lost loved one, but after having had a second look at this poem, you'll find out that it's mostly about getting money back because people didn't pay them. Mostly because of the words used, such as expense, sad account, pay, losses. So, anywho, that's not relevant to this question. Can you explain what iambic pentameter is? Because iambic pentameter is a rhythm. It's a rhythm in which there's always two sets of syllables, and syllables in letter. And of these two syllables, the second one is stressed, beklemtoond. Met andere woorden, de tweede lettergreep heeft nadruk. So, if we look at the first sentence, when two recessions of sweet silent thought. This is not a very good example. It doesn't match. I'll use the third sentence as an example. I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought. Every second syllable, tweede lettergreep, is stressed. I sigh the lack of many a thing I sought. Now, this is not 100% true because many, that's two syllables, so Shakespeare's cheating. But the point is that this consists of 5 items, 5 sets, twee lettergrepen. One set. This is a set. This is a set. Another one and another one. And each set consists of one unstressed, één onbeklemtoonde, and one stressed syllable, één beklemtoonde letter. There's 5 of them, 5 of these sets, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. and therefore it's pentameter. Penta meaning 5. Making this iambic pentameter. It's iambic because an iamb is this set. This is an iamb, and so it's iambic, and it's pentameter because it's 5 of these sets. So there's others other types of iambic meters, such as iambic tetrameter, which is 4 of these sets. But Shakespeare is well known for using iambic pentameter. Many are known for using iambic pentameter. So I hope that answers your question. And Lisa, could you let me know if I've answered your question? What was the cause of the economic growth in the early 1700s? There's more than one reason for that. But the most important reason was the developments in Britain in general, in the sense that cities were growing. Although the Industrial Revolution didn't start until the 1760s, but before that time, England was finding prosperity through trade. So in the early 1700s, it was mostly trade with overseas territories that made them wealthy. And didn't copy and paste the question into the presentation, so I'll re-answer the question again. What was the cause of the economic growth that characterized Britain in the early 1700s? Mostly trade with overseas territories. Well, they call it trade, but it was actually just stealing, claiming land and claiming products that people in the colonies produced. And in the early 1700s, it was the Industrial Revolution that made Britain rich again. I hope that answers your question. There's a question about Queen Anne. Was she a Catholic? No, she was a follower of the Queen of England, the Church of England, and therefore she was Protestant. So was Queen Anne Catholic? No, she was a Protestant. Criticism on the tail of the type. I don't remember. I can look that up for you, but it's not it. So see if I can find it. Britannica says his work may act as a decoy to deflect destructive criticism from the state and established religion. So he was criticizing religion, and back in the days, and well, that's still applicable to our present day society. If you're criticizing religion, you're mostly making enemies rather than friends. So the criticism on Tail of the Top was mostly the fact that he was criticizing the establishment, government, and religion. But also regarding your question, R. Edmund Spencer, Alexander Pope, Daniel Defoe, Jonathan Swift, and Johnson, the only important people that we have to know something about regarding the 18th century. Well, there's Samuel Pepys that you need to look into because of his works as well, but that's not really, well, it is the 18th century, because he was one of the first ones to keep a diary and produce it and publish it in such a way. He wasn't one of the first ones to keep a diary, but he was one of the first ones to publish a novel in the form of a diary. And other than that, are they the only ones? Well, if you can answer the questions that have been published to Classroom merely by studying those people, then the answer is yes. And if the answer to that question is no, then you have to look into some other people. So my answer to your question, Rose, is check the questions in have been posted to Google Classroom. I'm not too sure. I'm trying to find out what you said. What is so special about the 7 Years' War between Britain and France? Is that one of the questions I'm talking about? Because I wouldn't be able to tell. Trying to see if I can find out about that one. Oh, what is special about that is that it was basically kind of a form of a world war because so many countries were involved. France, Austria, Sweden, Russia, Great Britain, Hanover, Prussia. So, what was so special about it is that it had so many countries who were involved in this war. And Britannica states that it was the last major conflict before the French Revolution to involve all great powers of Europe. I'm quoting him. I'll post the link in our chat so you can have a look at that. I can't post the link because Google says no. Rather extra but to be with me. So what I'll do is I'll post the link as a comment to my post on our Google Classroom. It's there right now. So you can read up on the 7 Years' War using the link that I've posted to Google Classroom. What did Pepys write about in his diaries? That's an interesting question. His diary is extremely significant for that era because one of the things he wrote about was the Great Fire of London. London burned down. A very large part of London burned down. Let's see if I can find a percentage. I think 80% of the city burned down. I'm not entirely sure. You can't find that right now. Anyway, a very big part of London burned down, including some of the oldest buildings around, including Shakespeare's Theatre, the Globe. Just a large part of the city. I think 80%, but I'm not entirely sure. Anywho, a large part of the city burned down. And because a large part of the city burned down, the archives, some of the archives also burned down. So there's hardly anything left from before that. Well, there is some stuff left from before the Great Fire of London. But what's interesting about Samuel Pepys' diary is that he described it, and he described the consequences and the aftermath. So that's extremely relevant to the history of Britain, and most specifically the history of London. Well, yes, the plague, which was one of the other things that many people that affected the lives of many. Um, and so his diary was just it still is very insightful to people who want to read up on London in that era. And I think it didn't even last that long. It's a diary that he kept from 1660 until, I have to check, 1660 to 1669, and he had to stop because he turned blind, so he couldn't write. Does that answer your question, Lars? What countries were Roman allies during the War of 1792? That's a good question. Yeah, that's a question that's part of the document. Let me check. See if we can find the answer together. Yes. I think it's Queen Anne's War. In 1702, Britain found itself at war with France and North America. And North America included Canada at the time. Yeah, that's what I can tell you about the Allies. I'm not too sure if there are any allies. It's a strange part of my question. What countries were rivaling? Rivaling allies. That's an interesting term. What countries were rivaling were Great Britain and France, and North America. But that wasn't a country at the time, so Great Britain and France is the answer to that question. Correct, where the Renaissance started and why? The answer is indeed in Italy. Regarding the war, there's another answer to that question. In our presentation. What countries were rivaling? Which ones were allies during the War of 1702? Well, that war could be one of two wars. It could be the War of the Spanish Succession, where England, Scotland, the Roman Empire, Portugal, and the Dutch fought against France and Spain. So England, Scotland, the Roman Empire, Portugal, the Dutch fought together, and they battled the French and the Spanish. And after that, it was Queen Anne's War that was fought. It was mostly France against Great Britain. During classes, you mentioned things such as the writers, as whether the writers lost their parents when they were young. Is that of any importance, or do we just have to focus on their works? Well, the answer to that question is it depends on the author. If the author was affected by losing their parents in any way, and if that event affected their writing, then yes. If it didn't affect their writing, then no. But in many cases, you don't have to know what. That's a tricky question. I was going to say you don't have to know what author lost their parents and what author didn't. That's not entirely true. Most poets started writing because of the misery that characterized their childhoods, and it's relevant to know what kind of misery affected what writer in what way. So focus on their works mostly, and then try to decide why they wrote the type of literature that they wrote, because that could be relevant. A recurring question that I missed here, which is what is metaphysical poetry? That's a question that can't be answered in one sentence. But I'll use a quote from Britannica.com. Metaphysical poetry is less concerned with expressing feeling than with analyzing it. Less concerned with expressing it, more concerned with analyzing it. With the poet exploring the recesses of his consciousness. The boldness of the literary devices used, especially of liberty, irony, and paradox, are often reinforced by a dramatic directness of language and rhythms derived from that of living speech. So, what do you need to remember of all this? Metaphysical poetry is about analyzing feelings rather than expressing them. And that's a rather steep contrast with the romantic poetry, typical romantic poetry, which was all about expressing it, all about being pure and expressing any type of emotion that one was dealing with. And then metaphysical poetry is more about analyzing these feelings. Why could the rape of the lock be called a burlesque, and what is a burlesque? That's a fascinating question. Burlesque is a piece of literature that focuses on anything that's very extravagant, over the top, as we would call it. Um, it's highly sentimental. It's highly emotions are highly. How should I put it? Emotions are exaggerated. Everything is exaggerated, basically. Um, it usually focuses on another poem or a type of poem, so it's usually satirical. Um, and what else do I tell you? It's highly similar to a parody, although a burlesque is usually more. It's usually even more over the top. It's usually even more extravagant and more exaggerated. And why could the red blog be called a burlesque? Well, listen to my re-listen to my explanation of one of the first questions that we discussed in this video, which was why were Alexander Pope and his work Brave as a Lock of such importance / significance. If you listen to that, to me answering that question, you'll find out why it's considered a burlesque as well. Um, Well, it's not just about the title. That's not the only reason why it's a burlesque. It's also because of the way people acted and responded to the actual action, which was the fact that somebody cut a piece of hair off of somebody else's head. And the way the family deals with that and the extremities that we find in their behavior, that's why it's called a burlesque, because they are so, they're overreacting. Lisa, yes, you can bring your novel of choice and the dictionary to your test, yeah. I don't think you need to know anything about Herrick. So, yeah, drop Robert Herrick altogether. What did Charles II do to develop literature and culture? Well, he didn't necessarily develop it, he restored it, much like he restored monarchy. Because Charles II was the first king after the short period of time in which Britain was a republic, after Oliver Cromwell had ruled the country for some years, and Oliver Cromwell had forbidden all types of theatre and literature. Well, he didn't forbid literature, but theatre was considered sinful, and any form of art and culture was considered unnecessary. And so as soon as Charles II returned from France, as soon as he was asked to take his seat on the throne again, he decided to undo all those things that Oliver Cromwell had done. So theatre was restored. Art itself was considered valuable again. So he didn't necessarily develop literature and culture, but he restored it. Can we use both dictionaries? Yes. these are the kind of questions you can expect on your test. Well, many of you have asked questions that came from the questions that have been posted to Google Classroom. So, yes. And by now, our time's up. So, I hope I've been able to answer your questions. Is there any, do you have any questions left that I didn't answer? You just posted a question on the Glorious Revolution. I'm not going to be able to answer that question within the time that we've got left. So what I'll do is I'll again post the Britannica page to the Glorious Revolution to our Google Classroom, and you can read up on that yourself. Kun, again, that's the question that comes from the document that has been uploaded to Google Classroom, which is your task to find out. And by answering that question, I'm literally doing your work. So I'm not going to give you that one. I'm not going to hand over that answer. Who were the Whigs and the Tories, and what did they represent? Well, the Whigs and the Tories are the two most important political parties. They're still mentioned. They're still called Whigs and Tories. The Tories are the Conservatives, and the Whigs are the Democrats, the Liberal Party. And what did they represent? Well, their political views. What music group of major importance was published between 1645 and 1660? I was going to say King James Bible, but that was published long before that time. The only thing I think of would be Paradise Lost, but that wasn't published until after that time. And it wasn't a religious book, because it was literature referring to religion. So, No, it's not Paradise Lost. I'm not quite sure about that. The Book of Common Prayer was published long before that time. So it's not Book of Common Prayer, and it's not Paradise Lost, and it's not King James's Bible. Let me check if that's on the test. On the test. It's not. So I'm going to leave you without an answer regarding that question. Questions from the multiple choice document, yes, they will be on the test. That's it. I'm going to leave you with this information. I hope it's been helpful. I wasn't able to answer the last question regarding the religious text between 1645 and 1616, but you can drop that question because it's not going to be of any importance. I hope this was helpful. Good luck preparing, and I will see you next week. Good luck on your test week.